Hi there, I'm Amy Griffiths, and I'm one of the journalists in Manx Radio's newsroom. And on this episode of Newscast, we're asking if there's enough support for children with high-functioning additional needs on the island, because according to one parent, the answer is no. She's calling for more help to be given to children like hers who struggle in a mainstream school environment. She wants to stay anonymous to protect her son's identity, so for now I'll call her Jane. She's been telling me her story, which contains reference to suicidal thoughts and may be distressing to some listeners.
So my little boy, he's 8 years old. He's very kind. He's very loving. Honestly, he's just adorable. Sometimes he's so sweet. He's really thoughtful. He's very loyal. He's fiercely protective over his friends. But he has been diagnosed with ADHD and autism, Asperger's, but they don't diagnose as Asperger's anymore. It's under the autistic umbrella. He can go into crisis, which can be very distressing for everyone around him and for himself. He will get aggressive, he fights, he'll punch, he'll kick, but when he's in this crisis, he's not quite aware of what he's doing. He's lost all control. His mind has just lost the ability to be able to control himself, and it's a real struggle for him. He struggles on a daily basis. He struggles to manage through a full school day. With his autism and his ADHD combined, it's just so confusing for him. He can have meltdowns, which can result in violence towards staff.
When he has episodes like that, how does that impact the people around him? Is he branded as the naughty child, for example?
Yeah, he doesn't get invited to parties and things. I think his class have learned to understand him a little bit better now, but there's still instances where other children can be, I don't want to say in danger, but he can throw things and he has to be removed from the classroom. He has to be handled by the teachers. He hits the teachers sometimes, which is quite stressful for them. And then I'll get phone calls to come collect him. And that's purely because he's just not managing the school day. There's so many things going on around him. Something can trigger him. Sometimes you won't even see it coming because he won't voice that he's struggling. He just keeps it all in. He's not a masker, so I know some children can mask and they can be able to get through, conform through the school day. But then when they get home, they have the meltdowns. But that's not what he does. And I suppose, in a way, that's a good thing because he feels safe in school enough to be able to do that. But the teachers, they do struggle. And I feel guilty as well for them because they don't go to work to get hit and it's tough, but they do the absolute best for him. I don't know how I would have got through without them. They're amazing.
What kind of impact does that have on him then? Because does he recognise that those sort of outbursts aren't what his friends are doing?
Yeah, definitely as he's got older. He's 8 now, and when he was younger he wasn't quite aware, but as he's getting bigger he's getting more aware. It's making his self-esteem really low. He's said he wants to harm himself. He has tried to harm himself by holding his breath when he couldn't find anything to hurt himself with, it's really upsetting as a parent, and I felt like there was no support, not from school but from outside sources. There wasn't enough support there for him. Once he got his diagnosis, I did ask for work to be done around ADHD and autism to be able to explain it to him, because as a parent, we can do our research and we can try and explain the best way what we can, but I think they need to hear it from professionals. So he feels like his diagnosis makes him a bad person because of his behaviours and the way he's acting, and his peers don't act like that. So he feels different, and I feel like if there was a little bit of education around that for himself, then he'd be able to handle it a bit better and not feel so low.
And what has your experience been like so far with CAMHS? I know you said you're on the waiting list for, and health services generally here on the island in terms of the support that you're able to get for him since you've had those diagnoses.
At the start, it was brilliant. He was able to go to sessions, and this was before diagnosis. Then once we got the diagnosis, he then started ESC, and he was doing 2 lots of emotional regulation, one at CAMHS and one at ESC. So I stopped the one at CAMHS because I felt like it was too much for him, and they said they would leave the door open for me to go back so he could go back and continue that with them if it was needed. It was needed. I asked for some anger management, but I was told that the wait list was too big and they couldn't provide that for him.
How does that make you feel as a parent, trying to get that support and feeling like you're coming up against a closed door?
It's frustrating. I mean, I feel like all that gets offered from CAMHS at the moment is medication, and it's extra medication every time there's a crisis. It takes a crisis for something to happen going forward, and that usually is just a referral to somewhere else, not to CAMHS. I've got a referral in for Mind Matters, but I'm still waiting. I haven't heard anything back from them yet. And this was after my son had a crisis at school, and when he couldn't find anything to physically harm himself with, he held his breath for as long as he could. That was just awful. And yeah, like I say, all I got was a referral, and I'm still waiting.
When we were chatting before this, you said that your son, who's 8 years old, he's having suicidal thoughts as a result of all of this, isn't he?
He is, yeah, and that goes down to the self-esteem and the lack of education that he's not being given. So when I asked for some work to be done around the ADHD and the autism, I just got, well, you need to wait for Jenny Court. And I know Jenny is the only person on Ireland who deals with the autism. She has a massive wait list. She's absolutely brilliant, but there needs to be more. There needs to be more trained people that can help her, that can help the children, help the parents, the schools, the teachers. They're amazing. The school that my son's at, I am very lucky to have all the support that I have. I feel like it's one of the best on the island for additional needs children. But if there was more education and more support there, then my child wouldn't be feeling like this. He wouldn't be feeling so low because he wouldn't feel different to everybody else. He would have the information to be able to process it, and there'd be resources for him to take himself away. In our school, we have 2 rooms. One that has like toys and stuff in for kind of therapy, and another one has just been turned into kind of like when the child's in crisis, so they just have teddies in there. My son suggested to the school actually to pad the room out. It's just so that it's safe, so when these children are in crisis, there's nothing that they can hurt themselves with, they can't hurt anybody else with.
And that's your 8-year-old son
That's my
suggesting
8-year-old,
that.
yeah. Yeah, he recognises, he knows when he's in a crisis, and he's starting to be remorseful afterwards. But yeah, it's really difficult for him.
And Manx Care has announced that it's going to be investing £4 million into hopefully getting the wait list down for the CAMHS service, and also to try and be more proactive rather than reactive to situations like this in terms of the way they actually help children. And what was your reaction when you heard that news?
I mean, that's brilliant news, and I hope it all goes to plan, because then these children who do need additional support and therapy and things like that, then hopefully they can manage, they've got enough staff to be able to do that instead of just medicating, because these children, they need the therapy, they need extra support. Yeah, I think it will be great.
For you, and with your experience with your son, what do you think would be the best thing that the island can do to support your son and other children like him?
He goes to ESC. They've been brilliant. They've offered extra support, but that's only for 1 or 2 terms, and they don't have the facilities to take a lot of children. So I feel like there's probably so many more parents out there struggling and not getting the help and support that they need, because there's just nowhere for these children to go. They're too high functioning for units, but they're just not coping in the mainstream school. I feel like they need more staff in the schools to be able to adjust and modify their timetable so that they can do something different with them, so they're not just having to sit in the classroom for all that amount of time, because some children just can't conform. Some children don't do well on the playgrounds and things out on lunchtime. I know that's one thing that my son struggles with, but then if you've not got the staff in the school to be able to take away and do the one-to-ones and do something else with them, then that's not going to be able to happen. So I feel like that's a problem, the understaffing. And I feel like that's where a lot of the stuff will happen as well, on the playground, and then your child gets in an incident and they get sent home. So it's lack of staff. That's a major issue. So if we had more support in the schools.
And we've talked a lot about your little boy and the effect that this has on him. What about you? How are you, and how do you cope with all of this?
I think I'm just in autopilot mode, to be honest. There isn't any support for families out there who've got diagnoses. I've joined the autism page and I often see parents writing on there that they're struggling, they're getting hurt by their children, they're just at their wits' end, but there isn't anywhere for parents to get support and also for the siblings to get support as well, because I know my daughter, she's on the Crossroads wait list, but I think she's been on there about 1.5 years. They keep the same children on there until a child leaves, then another one can be accepted. So maybe that can be a better system in place so that these siblings are also getting the support as a family as a whole.
And again, though, that's charity support. That's not support from government.
Yeah, there is no support from government. There's just a complete lack of understanding. I mean, they all say that years ago this wasn't a problem and it's only became a thing now, where I feel like it's always been there. There's just more awareness for it now. But there's still a lot more needs to be done to educate people around autism and ADHD as well, but certainly autism, because I know before my son got diagnosed, I would think of someone with autism, I think you'd be able to see it, but it's not visible to everybody. Every autistic person is different. Every autistic person has different troubles and struggles in life. There's a saying, once you've met one autistic person, you've met one. Yeah, then there needs to be some more support around that for parents and teachers as well as the wider public, because I've had messages before where my son's hurt someone, or I have actually been quite lucky, but whereas the parents have dealt with this sort of thing before, so they've kind of got a bit of knowledge, but it still doesn't stop him not get invited to parties and things, because some parents just don't know, they're just naughty and they don't want their child to be associated with them. And it's quite sad, because he's come home in tears before, because he's literally been one of 2 people that haven't been invited to a party, and that happened on 2 occasions.
The number of children and young people on the island with a high-functioning additional need is on the rise. In fact, of the 1,200 who are waiting to be seen by the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Service, or CAMS, the vast majority are said to be waiting for an ADHD or autism assessment. Just a couple of weeks ago, a £4 million investment into CAMS was announced, hoping to reduce waiting times and switch from a reactive approach to a proactive one. But how exactly will that help? I asked Head of Integrated Mental Health Services at Manx Care, Ross Bailey.
It's tremendously exciting to ultimately get the funding that we so desperately need, so we can really transform CAMS and our services for children and young people. And really the focus is twofold, really. It's so we can address the current waiting list, which is significant, but also transform the way we deliver services with a much more of a focus on intervening earlier. So we know that mental health conditions are no different to physical health conditions. The earlier you do something about it, the better the prognosis, the better the outcomes. So that's our focus in terms of this transformative approach. It's intervening earlier, and one of the ways we're going to do that is embedding professionals in school settings, which we're working closely with our colleagues in education to build, and something we're really excited about.
And that's something I'm going to pick up on in a minute, but I think looking at the numbers, 1,200 children currently waiting for support from CAMS, and I think to people listening that is going to sound like a really high number. And why is it that is so high? Why are mental health services so in demand from our young people here?
Historically, we've probably not invested enough resource, money, time and energy into those earlier interventions. So those kind of community-based interventions where we can be more proactive in treating young people who present with a myriad of problems and challenges. Very few tend to be mental illness. Typically, there can be sort of common mental health disorders, such as kind of anxiety and sort of low-level depression. And what we've, I think, failed to do historically is have those interventions or those services more upstream, so within school settings, within community settings, so we can intervene earlier. So, I mean, that's the whole sort of model that we're looking at shifting. So we've designed a CAMS service that really historically has been developed for people with severe and enduring mental illnesses, for quite chronic and acute conditions. And isn't established or delivered in a way to cope with the more lower level sort of anxiety, common mental health problems which people experience.
It's obviously something that is a big problem. I mean, looking at the numbers here, caseloads have gone up by 90% in 3 years. 13% of all 4 to 17-year-olds are receiving or awaiting some kind of treatment. currently waiting lists are 48 weeks, with the hope of this money helping get them down to 18 weeks. Is £4 million actually going to be enough to try and address some of these issues for mental health service provision here?
I think it's an incredible start for us, and it's an enormous opportunity, and it's one, huge leap having the money secured, which is wonderful. The real work starts now in really sort of radically changing how we deliver services. So that's the real work starts now. So as I've said, if we can develop a model and we've got clear laid out plans on how we're going to do this, is the first thing we need to do is pull some additional staffing in on a temporary basis to focus on those waiting lists, to get those waiting times down to the 18-week target that we want, and improve upon that in due course. But that's not enough. What we really need to do is sort of shift our focus onto intervening earlier within people's lives. We know, all the research indicates that 50% of mental health problems are established by the age of 14 and 75% by the age of 24. And that's research by the Mental Health Foundation. So we know that the more we invest in children and young persons' mental health, the better the outcomes throughout their adult lives. So I think the £4 million certainly gives us a fantastic footing in which to shift our focus onto being a more proactive service, intervening much earlier, rather than the reactive service that we are, I think, historically and at the moment, where we wait for someone to become unwell and then we try to do something about it. What we want to do is, when we see these emerging mental health problems, particularly in school settings and in community settings, that we intervene there and then. It's a much more proactive approach rather than the reactive model of delivery that we're reliant on at the moment.
And you talk about wanting to make sure it's a more proactive approach, and is that purely from the research suggesting that is then more effective, or has that come from a potential disparity between what CAMHS has actually historically provided and what people think it should be and what they think that they're entitled to from the service?
I think people are entitled to a service that's got a sound evidence base, that's reactive to their needs and is based upon their needs, not necessarily a diagnostic criteria. So I think that's an entirely reasonable expectation. What we're planning or what we're proposing in terms of the services going forward for children and young people is built on a sound evidence base. So some of the work we're looking at about has been rolled out in the UK and internationally, and has got some excellent outcomes, particularly the work that we're intending to undertake in school settings, absolutely in partnership with those schools. So we're looking at having a dedicated full-time mental health practitioner for every one of the secondary schools on the island, and including UCM, and we certainly want to build on that going forward. We want to develop a service where a single point of access, where there's one way into the service, and families and carers and children who are of a certain age can self-refer. They can do that by phone, they can do it by email. So we're not reliant on people having to go to their general practitioners or to our health professionals to come into the service. We want to really increase our capacity for delivering sort of low to moderate psychological therapy for children as well. So these approaches really differs from the kind of historical model.
And if we're looking into a bit more of the specifics of things, so within the 1,200 children waiting for CAMHS support, it said that an overwhelming majority of children waiting are waiting for autism and ADHD assessment. So what is the root cause of that? Is that actually more of an increased awareness in those particular conditions, or is it actually something else that's causing that increase in demand?
I think there's a significant. I think people's awareness and understanding of kind of the neurodevelopmental conditions, is far better than it has been ever. So it's much more in the public conscious. I think that people are recognising, professionals, families, and communities are recognising that some of these conditions, although they often come with some real strengths, do present some challenges for children and do impact on the way that they manage and cope at home and in school settings. And there's some fantastic treatment options out there, not just reliant on medication, but psychological treatments as well. So I think absolutely there's an increased awareness, and we're saying with 1,200 children on the waiting list, there's 700 or 800, I think, of those children are waiting for neurodevelopmental assessments. Now, not all of those will be assessed as meet the kind of diagnostic criteria for ADHD or autism. So I think time will tell as we work through that waiting list. We'll be able to see the prevalence levels, but I think anecdotally what we see is higher levels of prevalence of neurodevelopmental ADHD and autism on the island than we see in the general population of the UK. Now, we're not clear why that is. There's be a huge amount of research required to unpick that. But what's most important for our communities is that we're able to see and assess and treat those children in a much more reactive, responsive than we have been able to do previously with the resources available to us.
And part of the way you're hoping to do that is £500,000 of this £4 million is going to hopefully be used to recruit 6 more people to help get through those waiting lists and help get through those assessments. And how many currently are there who are able to do these sort of assessments?
We're looking at bringing some additional staffing in to release our existing staff who are really very, very skilled at undertaking these assessments. So it's an extremely challenging sort of recruitment market out there, and attracting people to the island, healthcare professionals and social care professionals and professionals across the board is challenging because of how competitive the market is. But what we want to really do is utilise the fantastic resources we have within our teams. We've got incredibly skilled professionals who are able to undertake these assessments, and what we want to do is bring colleagues, campus professionals in so we can release our highly trained staff to undertake these assessments and focus on these assessments. This waiting list of 1,200. So we're not essentially bringing staff in to undertake them. We've got suitably qualified and skilled professionals to do that, but we need to bring staff in to backfill them so they can be released to undertake that function. Given
those global issues of recruitment that I've spoken about multiple times with various people from Manx Care, given the timelines of everything, when do you think that people are actually going to see a noticeable difference within the service? And not the quality of the service that they get, but just the time it takes to be able to get that service. When do you think people will actively see that difference?
Well, we're in the process of actively recruiting now. So it's, I suspect we're not going to get 6 professionals landing on our doorstep within the initial recruitment phase. I suspect we're going to be drip feeding that in, but I'm expecting to see an enormous difference in the next 12 months in terms of both the volume of people waiting and the amount and the time they are waiting.
I asked for an interview with the Education Minister, Daphne Kane, but was sent a statement instead. It says the department is committed to an inclusive education policy whereby measures are implemented to ensure that each pupil can access the curriculum regardless of their needs or personal circumstances. This involves implementing suitable arrangements for pupils who have additional and complex educational needs. Following the recommendations looking at how our schools are funded, we hope to carry out a review of additional educational needs. During this review, consideration would be given to best practice within and outside the island, taking into account the following areas: the development of dedicated facilities for children with complex needs, allowing for the concentration of specialist resources and expertise while ensuring inclusivity of the curriculum by supporting focused and structured access and improving equity of offer. The use of alternative resource centres to support the delivery of provision for pupils with less complex needs, but who otherwise have difficulty accessing mainstream on a permanent basis. The role of alternative provision within schools, including the role of online provision, as well as on-site and off-site provision, and the function of each. And finally, the role of other agencies in working together to deliver improvements for children with additional educational needs. A timeline for this review has not yet been given.
Thank you for making it to the end of the Manx Radio newscast. You are obviously someone with exquisite taste. May I politely suggest you might want to subscribe to this and a wide range of Manx Radio podcasts at your favourite podcast provider so our best bits will magically appear on your smartphone. Thank you.